Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lamont Weber, and we have an extraordinary panel today whose master of ceremonies is Gary Carlson, and our guest of honor is Michelle Gibson. And the subject matter generally, and I stand to be corrected, is that of stolen history or hidden history. Michelle Gibson has a website, piercingtheveilofillusion.com, and it's about our fabricated timeline. What on earth is going on Earth? The 1800s, our truncated, fabricated timeline, discovering the remains of an advanced civilization. Where are we? Over to you, Gary and Michelle.
Hello. During my work doing soul reports, I discovered Michelle Gibson as running articles about our missing or changed history, and it fit into my work of trying to point out to the world that we're being ruled by reptilians. And some of them are in human bodies and they have reptilian souls and they're controlling us. I'm having a hard time explaining that to everybody, but the three of us firmly believe this to be the case. And Michelle here, Michelle Gibson, did remarkable discoveries of how our history's been changed, stolen, and she was kind of rewritten in 1851, and other researchers have independently found the same timeline, she claims. And I'm using the pendulum work, and I get agreement on that as well. And I worked real hard last night to try to find the exact date of when the reptilians got involved with humanity. As you may know, we're supposedly finishing our third cycle of 25,920 years. And the window to make ascension will open in 5 to 9 years. So those people qualified for ascension, and star seeds are here to make ascension when our third cycle ends and the window opens. But these reptilians are controlling the world with negative control. And they're really in high gear right now with this COVID-19 and trying to make everybody wear masks and shutting down all kinds of businesses, stopping sports and schools, and things are really terrible. And what I have found out asking is that the reptilians were able to get their souls in some human bodies, and along with there's draconians are like 88% of them, and 12% are lizard people that were able to put their souls in human bodies. And I get that this happened in 1662 is the year I get when they first got their souls in our bodies. And they've been ramping up their control and changing history since then. And so anything you read in history that happened before 1851 can be true, slightly true, or totally fabricated. We can't even be sure if George Washington lived, or if Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great existed. They seem to have completely rewritten history. And here's Michelle Gibson to tell us more on that. And after she explains what she has found in her research, she's going to come up with questions that I'm going to try to get answered with the pendulum, and to help us uncover what has been changed or taken from us. Go for it, Michelle.
All right, thank you, Gary, for the introductory words. Let me give you a little bit of background about myself. I was born in July of 1963, so I came in right before the Kennedy assassination, and I was raised outside of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland. How's the sound for me? Is it picking up okay?
I hear good.
Okay, great. I received my bachelor's degree in social work and psychology from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County in 1989. I have lived in many different places and traveled extensively. And that's really an important point, because I'm not formally educated in this subject, but I think that's an advantage, because I think if I had gone into studying history or archaeology in college, I think it would have all been bunk, essentially. So I came into this as, like you said earlier, Alfred, a blank slate, with just a lot of passion and curiosity. I firmly believe there would be no mysteries in history if we had been taught the true history. And I've found compelling evidence for the physical layout of the Earth's grid system and its suppressed global civilization. And I'm going to be going into that more in just a minute. I grew up on a street next to a golf course that I now believe was a flat-topped pyramid. And that was one of my first realizations, was that golf courses are a cover-up of mound sites. And I was keyed into that when I looked up Indian Mounds Golf Course on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia, which has an interesting history of interest in it by the very wealthy. Even now it is owned by the state of Georgia and run by a self-sustaining, self-governing body. It became a retreat for the very wealthy in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and was the place where the Federal Reserve System was created in 1910. There's also the Newark Mounds Golf Course in Ohio. It's also a special place. The Octagon and Great Circle earthworks at Newark are located on a golden ratio longitude on the planet, along with other sites like Poverty Point in Louisiana, and Chavin and Pachacamac in Peru, and Tiwanaku in Bolivia. Carl Monk says in his video on the code that there is a correlation between Stonehenge and Newark. So building a golf course onto the Newark earthworks is like building a golf course on Stonehenge. And these earthworks come into play on 11 of the holes. So I'm going to be giving examples scattered throughout this, but that was really a big aha moment for me when I realized that. But my investigations have gone much further and deeper. I remember playing around big stones as a child growing up, and I feel like I was connected to this information long before I became consciously aware of it. Like maybe my soul mission was to do this work. It's like, it's based on my life experience, because I wasn't born into knowing any of this information. So it's much of it is experiential for me. Books that I read, movies, videos, presentations, it came from different sources, but it really started coming together for me when I started doing my own research. And I was introduced to sacred geometry and the concept of an intentional grid system all over the earth through Drunvalo Melchizedek, starting around 2007. And I was living in Fairbanks, Alaska at the time. And Drunvalo mentions a physical earth grid in his 2010 video, Birth of a New Humanity. And that he said it was the result of one mind and one plan that's this construction started after the fall of Atlantis, with the Great Pyramid of Giza at the center of the Earth's landmass being its prime meridian. At the time, I remember thinking, well, that sounds great, but who could have built it? Around 2015, I figured out that anything with rock or stone in it is part of a cover-up code, including words like bluff. Like a bluff is a bluff. A bluff is actually ancient infrastructure. Canyon, mesa, escarpment, and even the word natural in anything like steps, springs, and falls is a clue. So what really got me started on my own original research is a friend gave me this map. And I don't know if you can see it very well in here, but I found a star tetrahedron when I started connecting cities that lined up in lines on the map. So that's like the Star of David. And it's the top part of it is in Edmonton, and then it goes down to Ottawa, and then it comes down across through the United States, through like Indianapolis, St. Louis, Oklahoma City, El Paso, and then it goes back up to Edmonton, and then the bottom apex down here is Merida, Mexico. And from the researchers that I was following, I knew that the ancients were very precise in their alignments. Other researchers had found circle alignments. And I believe in finding this star tetrahedron, I found the terminus of the Earth's grid system. And I knew enough to extend the lines out. And when I did that, I've got, let's see, 19 spreadsheets here of places that lined up either in circular or linear fashion. Okay, so all of my research is based on these data points. And when I started looking up the places, I thought to myself, holy cow, everything looks the same in very different places around the world. The architecture, the style of the street layout. And I'm going to give some more examples here in a moment, but that was about 2016. And then I really wanted to share it. And it's not something that's very easy at all to verbalize. So it's like, how am I going to tell people and show people what I'm seeing? And around 2017, somebody suggested that I meet with somebody that was a videographer. And that's when I got started on making my first video. And that project ended up falling through, so I made my own video. I downloaded the easiest video equipment I could find. And they're very simple. I'm not very fancy, but it gets the information out, which was all that I wanted to accomplish with it. And so I made that video and I started blogging in June of 2018. And I put out about one blog post a week since that time, sometimes more, sometimes less, but around that time. And when somebody subscribed to my YouTube channel, I thought, now I have to start making movies. So that was when I realized I could just convert my blog posts into videos. And so I'm on YouTube as well. And by far, I have the greatest reach for my audience with YouTube. And my channel's actually been growing rather quickly here recently. I've doubled in the last month. So I went from 6,000 subscribers to 12,000 subscribers in around a 30-day period. So what I'm grateful for is that it is different information, but it's resonating with a lot of people. And I do get some very hot comments sometimes, but you know, that just goes along with the territory. You know, it really challenges people's belief systems. And if a belief system is particularly rigid, then I have a tendency to get a really hot comment. But otherwise, it's reaching people. And I'm not monetizing it. I do have a donation button on my website, and I do have a Patreon account. But to me, this is it's not my information. I'm just a vessel, and it's imperative to get it out, because when you realize the extent to which we've been lied, it's just mind-blowing. And you know, the crimes against humanity are just legion, and they can commit the crimes against humanity because nobody knows the truth, which is we've all been manipulated by race and religion, and everything was revised based on the original civilization, but it was taken out of context and it was turned into organized religions, and it was turned into signs and symbols of the original civilization. So it was turned into a weapon against humanity, unfortunately. So in the course of my research, I wanted to add, I started out with these data points, and my greatest joy is just doing pieces where I'm following the alignments. I tend to not get as many views on those, but it's how I've gotten all this other information. And if I wasn't tracking the alignments, I would not be able to put the bigger picture together. And that was when I started noticing all kinds of inconsistencies. And, you know, they tell us we were very low technology up until the early 1900s. And yet at the same time, they're building massive canals in the early 1800s, they're telling us. It doesn't match. And then when you really dig into it, that's true across the boards. And it's just been made up. Joe Blow, who had no experience in architecture, built this massive structure, or was the architect of this massive cathedral or city hall in New York or wherever. And a lot of times it'll give a name and you can't find any information on the architect that's named there. And that's because somebody else built it. So some of the other things I found are integrated rail systems and destruction of much of these systems. And I'm going to go back into that in a little bit. I believe the rail systems were built by the original civilization. They look the same all over the world. Again, the stories don't match about how they were built and who built them. Subways, trolley cars, the whole 9 yards. I consistently find star forts on planetary alignments, and I don't know if either of you are familiar with star forts. It's like a gateway subject for this, a gateway topic for this subject is star forts. And they're typically called military in nature, and they were built like after in the 1800s, typically. But they're the same style and size all over the world. There's different configurations of star forts, but they're massive. And I've come to believe they are definitely not originally military. I think they were originally part of the Earth's grid system, some kind of circuitry. And I also find archways that perfectly frame large buildings worldwide. It's like it's right smack in the middle of an arch, like a big building, like it was intentional, and not just in one place. I've got examples from different countries. Like I said, flimsy stories to explain the existence of all the infrastructure, considerable destruction of monumental architecture, obelisks everywhere. The history we've been taught is just really, really flimsy when you get right down to it. When you even take a cursory look at it, it doesn't hold up.
Phony is the word.
Yeah. Now, Gary's done his testing on dates. I have come up with an explanation that I don't know if I'm spot on with it for sure, but it's definitely in the ballpark because there's different reasons for how I came into the information. I believe there was a deliberately caused cataclysm that resulted in a liquefaction event. It's called a mud flood, and that's how this original civilization was wiped out. There's plenty of underground infrastructure where either pockets of original humans could have lived and the beings behind this. And I absolutely agree with Gary that we're talking non-humans. And at the very least, reptilians, there might be some other negative ETs involved in this, but it's a very hostile takeover of Earth and humanity for the purposes of power and control. And I believe our enslavement was the goal. Now, I don't think they're going to win. I really don't think they're going to win. But that's what all of this is about. That's why it was done. Humanity is special. We don't know we're source. We don't know we're divine. And they've removed all of this information from our collective awareness, our spiritual abilities, our connection with all life. And they've taught us that God's outside of ourselves and we're powerless, and they tricked us into worshiping them. And they sucked all the money up, and left places in ruins and seriously degraded us.
They brought in archons to implant us, etheric implants.
So what I think took place, and I've connected it to the Philadelphia experiment, and there are reasons I was drawn to that. I don't know if either of you are familiar with an author named Peter Moon.
Yes.
But he did a lot of work on the Montauk Project, time travel. He did a lot of work on the occult and Aleister Crowley. And he talked about the Philadelphia experiment. And he didn't suggest that it was taken back in time, but he did talk about it. And he talked about Aleister Crowley being involved in an occult ritual on the day of the Philadelphia experiment. And then when I started doing my research, it came into my head that there was a connection between the year of 1492, which was the fall of Moorish Spain, and 1942, which was the midway point of World War II. And I deduced there was a 450-year period between those years at the midpoint, and the midpoint year is 1717. And when I started looking up history starting from 1717, a lot of anomalous information came up. And for example, that the House of Stuart was basically denied the throne, and the House of Hanover came from Germany, and that was the beginning of the Georgian era. It was happening right around that time. On 7/17/1717, Water Music by Handel was premiered on a barge on the Thames for George I. It's an extremely numerological date. And then these negative beings are into that kind of thing, numerology, spell casting by numbers, you name it. You know, they just subverted the whole sacred geometry that life and this civilization was based on, and turned it into a control mechanism. And I think that's one of the reasons the fight for humanity has been so hard, is because we can't see them. We don't even know they're there, and they're doing things to purposely try to keep us down, essentially. And like Gary mentioned, implants and things like that. I mean, most people don't even acknowledge that there is a spirit world. So, you know, go figure. It's a hard message. And as a matter of fact, I got a comment on one of my videos where I was talking about this on YouTube. And I mentioned in that particular video that I was guided to the Great Frost of Ireland of 1740 to 1741 by a psychic friend who came to visit me briefly. And she looked over in the corner of my room and she said, "Oh, I see your guides." And then she said, "They wanted me to tell you something." Because I don't pick up stuff like that. I'm intuitive, but I'm not clairvoyant or clairaudient. I would call myself clairsentient. And the message was, they're seeing Ireland in 1743, and on one side it's white and frozen, and on the other side it's sunny. And so I looked up Ireland in 1743, and there were only two things that came up. And one was that it was a Great Frost, where there was a 21-month period of extreme cold in Ireland that resulted in 500,000 deaths, at least. And the other was that Handel's Messiah premiered in Dublin in 1742, in the spring of 1742, which would have been right after this extreme weather event that doesn't have a known cause. And so I put that piece together with the Philadelphia experiment, and I speculated that that was a time travel involving the Philadelphia experiment, sending it back to that moment in time, creating a rip in the fabric of space-time. And that might sound out there, but there's actually a movie about a time-traveling naval vessel called The Final Countdown, which I didn't know about that until it popped up on my YouTube feed a couple of weeks ago. So that's been put out in the field as a concept for a movie. So it may sound far-fetched, but I really don't think it is. There's too many pieces here that connect. And right after that, in 1744, Mayer Rothschild was born in Germany. And in 1748, Adam Weishaupt was also born in Germany. And he was the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. He was a Freemason. And a lot of people think he was George Washington. I've heard that. That's more second, third hand for me. And so he was a leading figure in the creation of the Illuminati. And I think these reptilian or whatever they are incarnated into these particular families, the 13 bloodline families. I also think fallen angels are part of this whole mess. So anyway, I think that event created the mud flood. There's different ideas out there about how that happened, but it's just how my research has unfolded. And then as far as the time period, I think it took them about a little over 100 years to dig out enough infrastructure to restart civilization. And that by 1851, I call it the official kickoff of the New World Order, because that was the year of the Crystal Palace exhibition in London, the first one, like the first World's Fair. It was also called the Great Exhibition of the Works of All Nations. And I believe that these world fairs for the next 100 years or so were showcasing the original technology before they were destroyed, before everything was destroyed. And or hidden away, because I think the bad guys, if you will, use that technology in so many ways, again, that we're not aware of because we don't know about it. There's a lot of moving pieces in there, but it's all very well documented in my blog. And that was the same year that the Prime Meridian was moved from Giza to the Royal Observatory in Greenwich in London, 1851. And then as I'm researching for all my blog posts, I'm just seeing this date range like pop right up. The late 1700s to just after the 1900s, with a whole bunch of stuff happening in the years between 1840 and 1860, which would have included the Victorian era. So I think a lot of architecture called Victorian was actually the original civilization as well. And what I'm seeing and saying is that something happened recently. That this didn't happen a long, long time ago. That this whole chain of events was somehow facilitated, and humanity was on a very positive timeline. Maybe even up to the equivalent of 1942 on the original timeline. That is definitely speculation, but we're still using that architecture. It's schools and churches and banks and theaters and art museums. And I mean, we're looking at classical architecture. What we're taught in school is Greek and Roman. We're seeing built all over North America in we're told the late 1800s, early 1900s. And we can't build like that today. So something is really, really fishy with the timeline. Now I can keep going. I've got tons of information. So do you have any questions so far?
Yes, I do. The mudflood event, what was the date of that? What date do you posit that?
I'm positing around the 1740s. And other people might come up with different dates and have different ideas about it, but there are a lot of mudflood researchers. I was brought into it because somebody connected me with a mudflood researcher. And when I watched a couple of his videos, I realized we were all looking at the same buildings. And, you know, the idea that there's a substantial amount of infrastructure underneath the ground as well, you know, buildings that just go down, down, down.
I get 1822, and it happened the same all over the world at the same time. They did something from, I think, the draconian reptilians in their spaceship hit the earth with some kind of weapon or something.
I think there definitely could be multiple causes for it, but something most definitely happened, and it was most definitely deliberate, or it would have been an extinction level event, and none of us would be here.
Why don't you explain how the buildings are like their first floor is covered with mud and the windows? I mean, how it was discovered? Can you say a little bit on that?
I can talk about it a little bit. There's a lot of cities that have extensive underground networks. Like, I think there's a ton more than we even know that aren't open to the public, but like Seattle, Portland, Martinsville, West Virginia, you know, they're just extensive underground networks. And so again, the idea is that if you look at buildings, a lot of times you'll see, for lack of a better word, disappearing windows or unlevel windows, or windows partially sticking up out of the ground. You know, like the pavement was made there, but why would you put a window, you know, there? Underground, you might call them basements, or
like the bottom of the building was lower, and then mud came in and covered up part of the building, and then they decided that the ground floor is now at a new place, like 12 feet higher, and so some windows are part of the windows above the ground and part of the windows below the ground, and then it's unlevel where, you know, it's like, how would they build a building like that? And we see that over and over again in different cities all over, which indicates that there was some kind of a mud flood event.
And if you Google mud flood, you're going to come up with a treasure trove of pictures. You know, so there's a lot of researchers looking into this subject.
Oh, right. So what's your focus on the mud flood?
What's my focus on the mud flood?
Yeah.
What did it do? How did
I think it wiped out the original civilization. I think that's how they did it. How they wiped out, they dug out enough infrastructure, probably rewrote history during however much time there was, and they were ready to go when...
They seemed to save a lot of children and put them on trains and put children on trains out to the rural areas. And like, where did all these children come from?
Right. And people talk a lot about orphan trains.
Yeah, there's videos on that, orphan trains, there's pictures and stuff. So they probably wiped out the adults and saved the children to start the new society. And the children, you can teach them whatever you want in school, and that's their history. And now they're gonna believe whatever lies you tell them, and they start rewrite the history that way by wiping out the adults and keeping the children.
So is Pandemic 2020 Mudflood 2?
I think it's part of their end game. I mean, I think we've been vaccinated forever how many years in preparation for this, and I think it was intended to be how we were going to be microchipped. And again, I have reason to believe it's been interrupted, and I think people are waking up, and I don't think these guys are going to be successful in what they were planning. They're more exposed than they've ever been, but I think it's being used as a control mechanism, the whole thing, and it's being presented as a public health issue. But they either want humans they can control, or they don't want you.
Right. So when you're talking about the orphan trains of the mud flood, and you originally talked about the Draco and the Archons being sort of the perpetrators of the original mud flood, the orphan train sounds like there's a lot of integration and cooperation with an elite human matrix that are in cooperation with the Dracos and the Archons back in the original mud flood. Is that,
I would call that accurate. Now, like Gary said earlier, I do believe they managed to incarnate in human form. So I think we're talking about physical and non-physical.
Yeah, I'll explain the Archons. Archons are a type of demons. Angels and demons are the same type of soul. Angels have empathy for others. Demons do not have empathy for others. And Archons have special talents or whatever, and they were brought here from somewhere else by the negative ETs. And Archons have a way of taking the younger souls and putting etheric implants in their minds and stops them from becoming spiritual or cuts off their connection to the divine. And that's why people that are still in the cycle of humanity, like I do soul reports, and most people are in this 25,920 year cycle. They're somewhere along the way in there. And then there's people that completed the cycle that I call qualified for ascension. There's star seeds from other planets that completed the cycle on their planet, had trouble making ascension, so they're come to Earth so they can make ascension and use the talents of their souls to help Earth while they're here. And then there's wanderers, people that lived on another planet, made ascension, went to the higher realms, and were highly spiritual and qualified and asked to come back to third density for almost a cycle to help humanity. Us three are wanderers. So anyway, the people that are still in cycle, the younger souls, the Archons can implant these people, and they're like really hard to what you call wake up. They won't understand that we're being negatively controlled and what's going on because of the Archon implants. But the people that have already finished their cycle or starseeds or wanderers seem to be able to resist these implants. But there's, we're only a small percentage of the people, like under 5%. So the majority of these people are younger souls, and we're having a hard time waking them up because they're implanted by Archons. And Archons do other harmful things to society too, as other researchers or writers might tell you about. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the reason this was done is because they can't lay a finger on us because we're sovereign beings. So they had to come up with a complicated plan that we're living in order to convince us that they they rule us, they control us, and that so we don't know our power. And you know, like I said earlier, they've just tricked us into supporting them because humans are good, and these beings are absolutely evil. They will do anything, and we're seeing that play out right now. It's, I guess, just been more exposed, but I think this was the plan for a long time. And I seriously believe that Nazis are this group of negative beings, and that they've been with us for a long time, and that they're still with us. And they've given a little bit of history to Germany, and that this is where they were, and then they were defeated. And I'm saying, you know, these are the evil ones that are behind what's playing out right now. And again, I think we're going to see improvement. I think things are happening behind the scenes, but I have to believe that. I just can't believe they're going to get away with it. I really can't. What I would like to do is go into the 1800 timeline a little bit, you know,
Sure.
Since we talked about that. So I think the official start of the New World Order timeline was 1851. And I was finding how much was happening in our historical narrative between 1800 and 1900, and in particular around the year 1850. So I found this French explorer named Jules Dumont d'Urville, who led several scientific expeditions starting in 1822, and he claimed land for France in Antarctica on January 21st of 1840. The US exploring expedition, also known as the Wilkes expedition, same idea, seemingly independently of the French explorer, claimed land in Antarctica on January 16th of 1840. So that was just 5 days before the French explorer. I think they were out mapping the earth, finding out what's there after the mudflood event. The 3 voyages of the HMS Beagle first started in 1820 and the last ended in 1843. So what I've come to believe is that the history of Earth has been replaced with the history of those that took over and claimed the legacy of the original builders of civilization. And to restate what I just said, I believe all of these voyages of exploration were part of how they did it. I've done work on following the money and influence on addictions and how smoking and drinking beer and whiskey, all of these people were coming up around the same 1850 time period. Like Jack Daniels was born around 1850, R.J. Reynolds was born about the same time period. Molson got started a little bit earlier, but this whole idea of inebriating the population and lowering our consciousness was a big part of this reset. And then equating drinking with sports, movies with candy,
Popcorn.
you know, junk food. I think all of this is a concerted effort to, you know, make us, you know, pay them money. We've been paying them to do this to us. Essentially, they've gotten incredibly wealthy off of our addictions, off of going to the movie theater. And I don't even watch Hollywood. I haven't for years. I don't trust them any further than I can throw them. Okay, that's a bad scene. And you know, a lot of mind control stuff going on in there, predictive programming. A lot of people have pointed out there's predictive programming for 9/11 and the movie Back to the Future, and they've, you know, pulled out things, and that's just one example. They have to tell us what they're doing, so they tell us by not telling us they're telling us. And so I've looked into addictions, I've looked into distractions, I've looked into corporations and their origin. And I found that the first oil refinery for making lamp oil was established in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1854. And the beginning of the petroleum industry was in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859. Standard Oil was founded in 1870, GE in 1892, the Edison Electric Light Company in 1878, Thomson Houston Electric in 1882. Okay, so there are a lot of pictures, early pictures around the 1850s of streetcars being pulled by mules. And then starting in around 1882, companies like Thomson Houston electrified the street railway in Lynn, Massachusetts. And so I think they dug the infrastructure out. They used what was available until they could get it up and running. Okay, and I'm going to make a point about this whole system here in just a moment. The Gilded Age was between 1870 and 1900, and J.P. Morgan was a driving force behind the wave of industrial consolidation of the United States, like U.S. Steel and International Harvester. And then we start seeing the beginnings of the auto industry with Benz introducing the first gas-powered auto in 1885 and Henry Ford starting to operate in 1901. Okay, so I think they developed the automobile to have a replacement for the streetcar system, which was all electrified. It was run by free energy that was generated by the grid, which was a integrated, holistic thing all over the earth. They needed a replacement so they could remove the streetcar systems. In many places, they actually physically took out the rails, and we're talking streetcars everywhere. And then they after having been in existence for 50 years, for example, like Montgomery, Alabama, was said to have their streetcar system starting in the 1880s and retired the streetcars to be replaced by cars and buses in the 1930s. So an incredible amount of work, supposedly, for a very short period of time. And that happened all over the place. So we're not evolving, we're devolving with all of this technology on the surface, with the surface population. And then they could get fabulously wealthy off of the gasoline. You saw that with Standard Oil when John Rockefeller was the richest man in the world until it was broken up into the antitrust suit. But that didn't mean they stopped existing, right? I mean, you know, again, it might sound crazy, but when you really start looking at the details, it just really, there's just a lot more questions than answers about what was really going on here. But I know it's not for our best interest. But there are good people. I mean, there are definitely good people in the world. And, you know, most people just would be horrified if they knew what's taken place.
Yeah, we can't be sure of any history you read before 1851. I'm getting that the Revolutionary War didn't happen. That's just all made up, wrote history. And I think a lot of things may be that way. Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great, that's all baloney. Somebody got down and probably there's a lot of extra stuff added in the Bible, since that was a book to create a religion and control people. That book may have been written in the Bible may be completely written in the last 300 years.
I tend to think it was based on original books. A lot of books were removed. So it probably has a basis in what was originally here, but I think it was selectively edited so that humanity would not have access to other information that was in the Bible. Lost books of the Bible, human superpowers, all that stuff's in there. You know, they framed it a certain way, and they removed all the good stuff about the true nature of humanity and what I believe we're really here for, which is to learn how to connect with our higher selves.
I get that humanity has had space travel for the last 1600 years, and that's like they're trying to say that the Germans secretly discovered it in the 30s. I'm getting it's been going on for like 1600 years, and they had anti-gravity airships traveling the earth for thousands or hundreds of years, thousands of years. But I'm getting that just a few people were in on the high technology along the way, and most of the people were peasants and primitive, and they just seen it go by and didn't get in on it. Just a selective few people were involved in it.
I tend to think that there was that humanity was actually quite advanced within that civilization in terms of abilities and knowledge of who we were. But that's a big question mark because that history's just gone.
Right.
You know, so it's all kind of a guessing game, but you can look at the physical evidence and there's just a lot of inconsistencies between what we're taught and what's actually there. And it kind of, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can see the complexity of integrating mudflood studies. But let's just say that what you're bringing here are mudflood studies and mudflood discoveries. Is that a correct term? Or?
It's not a place that I started, but it's where my research is leading me, and that research is leading me to, in concert with the data points, because I've actually been following places in alignment and just looking and seeing what's there and what the history of that area is, and being able to see the patterns and pulling out the data to show that there's just something terribly wrong with what we've been taught in terms of
okay, and so there's a tremendous amount of data about the mud flood which is appearing now. Now, at the same time, there's also data which is experimental data following the law of evidence where we have multiple witnesses in terms of whistleblowers that have come forward from the secret quantum access programs of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, in terms of the time travel. And so I'm familiar with and have published, we've published testimony from a whistleblowing project participant in DARPA's secret time travel program, who in the 1970s was sent along with other children by DARPA using one of 8 time travel technologies, because we do live in a time-space hologram. We are in a time-space hologram. That's what our universe is, and we're souls that incarnate into a time-space hologram and inhabit these avatars, these human bodies inside of a time-space hologram. And they were sent by DARPA back to For example, back to the US Revolutionary War, and a group of young children were sent back to advise General George Washington at the time of the Battle of New York, to advise him to retreat. He was going to advance against the English at the time of the Battle of New York. And DARPA, which had knowledge, historical knowledge based in the 1970s and the 20th century, sent them, and they landed him in, according to this whistleblower, Andrew D. Bushago. He's published this. This is a matter of public record, met with Washington, and there were a number of children who were sent there and advised him to retreat instead, which Washington did. And they explained to him that they had been sent by the future nation that he would advise. And Washington said, "Oh, you're angels, aren't you?" And Washington actually wrote it up in his diary that he met with angels. And that, you know, has appeared historically as Washington's meeting with angels, but he met with time travelers sent to him by DARPA. And that's part of how Washington won, supposedly, the Revolutionary War against the British, because he was advised by DARPA, the US Department of Defense, from the 1970s. And Andrew D. Bushago participated in that. And we've interviewed him and we published that here. And he has some books coming out shortly that, you know, will publish this further, and you can view those interviews. So this does not contradict the mud flood data. It's just that we have to be extremely disciplined in all of the information that's coming out in our multidimensional reality and in all the technologies that are available. And I'm just responding to Gary's suggestion because I have to, you know, state as a host who has interviewed US chrononauts who have undertaken missions like that of historical significance that have resulted in presumably the founding of the United States.
The reason for the war could have been different, though, than freeing our country, you know.
Yeah. I mean,
they might have rewrote it and changed a lot of it.
There's a lot of, you know, there's matters of interpretation.
Right.
And I agree with that. But you know, and whether or not that was Adam Weishaupt in that tent, I don't know what to say.
And you know, it is. I mean, it's trying to.
That's the first suggestion that I've heard. Although I have followed the research that suggests that Skull and Bones, where the cover story is, and that's the secret society at the university that I graduated from, Yale University. The cover story being that it was founded in 1832 as a society from a German university, that in fact it was the second chapter of the Bavarian Illuminati founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1775, and that Skull and Bones was founded as the second chapter of the Bavarian Illuminati in 1776.
Yeah, I get those people had the reptilian soul.
Yeah.
And Washington had a human soul. So
yeah. So
it
and that was a conduit for the for the reptilians to infiltrate through Skull and Bones, to infiltrate the American Revolution through Yale University. So, I mean, I'm just, you know, while all this kind of wild stuff is wild in the sense of extreme science is being said, I just feel that I have to come in and,
go
as an umpire, and say, hey, wait, you know, there are boundaries here that have to be stated as well. They don't contradict.
We need to put it all together.
Yeah. Now,
And I just want to make the comment.
Born, and wait. Let me, as long as we're talking about it here, I happen to have been born at 8/4/5/42, 1942. I was born at 8:42 p.m. on May 24th, 1942. No? And so what does that mean in the greater scheme of things?
Right. And I just want to make the comment that, you know, clearly there's...
I'm going to bring you back to that question. What does that mean in the greater scheme of things? Because 1942 has been named as a boundary year, and I was born at the U.S. Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida, which is just off of the underground extraterrestrial bases off of Pensacola.
When you were born.
So, what does 1942 as a boundary year mean? Explain that. Go into depth. Explain it to us. You've been tossing out these wild theories, but explain them more in depth. I was born on May 24th, 1942, on the feast day of on a Sunday, Our Lady Help of Christians. Explain it.
If you can. Go ahead.
Bring it out. Bring out the meaning there. Tell me why my soul chose to incarnate on 1942, this boundary year. My mother always said, I was brought in as a counter to Hitler. Come on, explain it. Give me some meaning.
I will do my best.
Okay.
That's really interesting. I knew that 1492 was the year of the fall of the Moorish Empire. And I believe that Moorish is a reference to Lemuria, a very ancient civilization. And 1942 was in the middle of World War II. And I kind of ran down that list earlier with the Philadelphia experiment and everything. And my belief that this mud flood was deliberately caused. And so my research has kind of gone down that road. I can't explain everything, but I have really compiled circumstantial evidence anyway, that with 1717 being the midpoint year, that there is something to that, with 1942 being one end of what I call a 3D time loop and 1492 being on the other end. I can't really explain the mechanics of it, but I just get this sense that something really bad has taken place here. And I like I said at the beginning, I really believe I incarnated with this mission. I mean, there was nothing in my upbringing that would have put me anywhere near this. I'm from a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant family, Baptist family. At this point, I'm like worlds apart from them in terms of my belief system. And, you know, you can't have a conversation with most people about what my passion is and what I'm finding. And I'm motivated to do this work because I feel like it's extremely important to get this information out, so people can kind of look at things differently. I'm not trying to mislead. I'm not trying to misinform. If I ever do, it's not intentional on my part. You know, that we've been lied to, and we're still being lied to. Still being lied to. You know, we're better than that. It shouldn't be happening, and it is. And like was said earlier, you know, we're a small percentage of humanity on the earth right now. I mean, I think more people are waking up, but the really awake people are far and few between. And I do light work related to my understanding of the grid system, and with ground crew command radio mass meditations to transmute the darkness into light. So I know that's ongoing as well.
You're going to start thing in September. If you want to tell us about that.
Oh, I'm going to be, I've been invited to become an educator and educator and publisher on a brand new platform that's launching on September 3rd. And it's called unguru.com. So I'll have more information about that on the 3rd. I have a pretty good idea about what it's about, but it's brand new.
Could you repeat that, that platform?
The platform is called Unguru, UNGURU.com, and it's launching on September 3rd.
UN?
GURU.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, this is deadly serious stuff, you know, and humanity's fate is definitely in the balance, I believe. But I do believe we're going to be fine, but we're going through some painful times right now.
We're going through the cold, dark night of the soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this point, with these masks and lockdowns, and the average person is scared that the virus is going to get them. Yet, you know, I don't hardly see anybody involved in the pandemic. I just see people worried about it. I mean, and as far as racism goes, I think all the racism is done by the people with the reptilian souls.
Mm-hmm.
I think
it's being used as an agenda.
I get they started slavery and did all the slavery. They started all the wars. They're the ones that were instrumental in wiping out the American Indians or Native Americans. And they're doing a horrible deal on them in Canada. They're forcing them in schools and killing the children for sex slaves and stuff. Real bad in Canada for years and years and years. Kevin Annett is working on that. There's everywhere we look, there's wanderers that are tackling the right things to help humanity, and starseeds as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's all said and done, I think some people that are in cycle are going to lead the military to maybe take out a lot of the bad guys. There's one guy on Patreon that you can subscribe to. He just goes by Chief. And he's got a long list of well-known people that have been arrested and executed or held in Gitmo or serving life. And he explains that you still see all these people around today, but you're seeing a double or a clone. I mean, he's got on there that Mike Pence, Obama, and Joe Biden have all been arrested and executed. And what you're seeing is a clone or double of those people. And I get that his information is accurate. I've asked several times with the pendulum, and I'm getting things are accurate there. I think the more we can expose these people, expose them in every way we can. And today we're exposing how they're changing history on us. I guess if you don't know your own history, you're a less powerful group. They take your history away. They take away your power somewhat. Can you explain that better, Michelle?
We've been taught falsehoods in our education system. We've been taught those falsehoods are reinforced through movies, through music. That any of us have managed to wake up at all is really quite remarkable, considering the extent of this indoctrination. And we live in a free will universe. The only way they can get our consent is by lying to us. Mm-hmm. And that's how they've accomplished it. They've lied to us about everything. And we react from our best instincts. And it's being used against us. So we have to know. So we stop fighting each other. So we stop killing each other over manufactured issues. I absolutely believe that this whole scenario that's playing out right now was planned a long time ago, and they're using trying to start a race war to divide humanity even further. But it's also to usher in socialism and communism. And the far left wants complete power and control. Or I say the far left, it's on both sides. The swamp's on both sides, but that's what they want, is power, and they don't want to be held accountable for their crimes. And I would speculate the next couple of months are going to be rather interesting between now and the election. And I would expect to see maybe some high-profile things happening. I hope so. I hope I'm not wrong about that. I hope I'm not wrong about being optimistic, because if I am, God help us. But I don't think so. I don't think they're going to get away with this. What can you do when your government makes penalties for not wearing a mask? That's not even, what are we doing? We're going into restaurants with a mask on, we're sitting down, we're taking the mask off to eat, and then we're putting it back off to leave the restaurant, and we're taking it off when we get outside. It's not about disease. I'm not saying the virus isn't real. I'm saying this is controlling us. And then if you dare to not wear it, either you get assaulted or you get verbally abused by strangers, or you get fined. This is not
normal.
Not okay. Not okay. So,
and there's all kinds of doctors writing that the masks don't help you and that it's bad for your health.
Yeah.
Once you mix medical plus political equals evil.
Yeah, they're definitely they've definitely weaponized the situation. And I have heard that it could have been a lot worse on a lot of different levels, and that the white hats prevented it from being worse. But, people are dying as a result of this. I just placed my mom in an assisted living facility. She hadn't been in there a week, and they quarantined everybody because an employee turned up positive. Not even able to leave her room, except maybe for mail. I think that she's allowed to go down and get mail. My mom's a social person. She doesn't need to be sitting watching CNN all day. and obsessing. She needs to get out and be with people, but you know, especially when there are cures that aren't being publicized to everybody. It's not necessary to shut down a fragile population. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying I think there are other interventions besides keeping people stuck in their rooms that aren't being publicized. They're being demonized.
Yeah. So this is a mental mud flood.
Yeah.
No, really.
It is. Yeah. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, not to get not to derail it, but if I put on a different hat as a war crimes judge, you can go to International Criminal Code, which is at peaceinspace.org, and there we have a 101-page document, which is a sample request for a writ for an emergency injunction brought under the International Criminal Code that the pandemic is a genocide and crimes against humanity by perpetrators, by named perpetrators. And so all you have to do is go there, and that can be brought in the courts of any one of the 118 nations that have signed and ratified the International Criminal Court Statute or the Treaty of Rome. Of course, there are 5 or 6 nations that have not signed and ratified the International Criminal Court Statute. The People's Republic of China, the United States of America, the State of Israel, the Republic of Iran, the Russian Federation, and those are nations where war crimes are state policy. And they're the nations where the perpetrators behind the pandemic, which is a mental mud flood, reside and are hiding. And that's why nothing is being done, because these 5 or 6 nations have chosen to try and put up a wall against accountability for war crimes. So what we're doing is we're working with the 118 nations that have responsibly signed and ratified the International Criminal Code. Because you can, in the courts, national courts of any one of these 118 nations, take action against an act of genocide or a crime against humanity or a war crime, and it takes place anywhere in the world. And that's what the Treaty of Rome was designed to do. It wasn't to go to any, the specific International Criminal Court in The Hague. It was to give universal jurisdiction to the courts of the nations. But the major 5 or 6 nations that have adopted war crimes as national policy won't sign it. And that includes the United States of America. Okay? So I just want to make things clear that now the nation where I reside, Canada, is a signatory. There are people here that, their intent is to go to the courts here and to begin to use this. And we're working with groups that are going to do this. So I just want to give feedback to Americans that America is not the be all and end all on this planet. And as you well know, because I used to go to the conferences in Philadelphia, for example, where they would, like you just did, show how the founding fathers, you know, built their mansions on the mounds. You know, Mount Vernon was built on the Indian mounds, on the sacred mounds. They were genociders of the sacred mounds. And so I'm just verifying what you said.
Mountains are before the Indians.
So there's a whole side of the United States where In God We Trust was In Lucifer We Trust. And it's that side of the United States that had been infiltrated by the Bavarian Illuminati and has been Luciferian. So it's a war-fighting nation, and they desecrated the earth grid and what was sacred. So I just want to present the alternative side of this. George Washington, there's that story of the apocryphal dream that George Washington had about 3 wars being fought on American soil: the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and the final war.
Yeah, I've been hearing about China massing troops in Mexico and
by my counting, the final war will be a legal war in the courts that will shut down the pandemic. In other words, shut down the mental mudflood.
Oh, that'd be nice.
That works for me.
And that's what we have to do. You know,
That works for me.
I want to let's just get to the bottom of it. That this is a mental mudflood. It's a mental mudflood, and you can go to our blog and peaceandspace.org. The name of the blog is International Criminal Code. You can download the 101-page document, and you can see that what passes for the pandemic and the perpetrators of it qualifies as a genocide and a crime against humanity under the International Criminal Code and can be shut down. And the tests, it turns out that the tests for the so-called coronavirus, all that they test on your, they're just testing for certain genetic sequences that everybody has. So it's a total fraud. And what they've managed, because this Luciferic sequence, which you quite rightly said, these offices are inhabited by Luciferic souls, and so that's why everybody's obeying. You know, the tests are going to come out positive because they're just testing for a genetic sequence that everybody has.
Yeah, 8 chromosomes, one research put.
Yeah, and
they're saying they're testing.
Yeah, and everybody knows it, and yet
you're positive.
the ship goes on. So we are in a mental mudflood. So 2020 is the year, just like whatever the year was. So I come here, I was born in 1942, and I come here in 2020 to say, this is a mental mudflood. And, you know,
2020 vision.
So that's my piece of the puzzle. Okay? That's why I incarnated. And if I have anything to do with it, they are going to land, we have 101 pages that are just going to totally evaporate it.
You're going to be the judge, right? You're the judge.
Evaporate them. Here comes the judge.
Alfred, do you work with Robert David Steele, or is he part of another one?
Robert David Steele is with the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. Now, Judge Seven and I are with the Natural and Common Law Tribunal for Public Health and Justice. And we had one sitting together. And then in the middle of that sitting, I said, well, let's have another sitting at which we have a sitting in which we name all of the defendants on the pandemic. And Robert David Steele said, I don't think that's a good idea, and so I'm going to vote against it. So the day after that, I called up my friend, and this is for the public airing, because Robert David Steele used to work for the CIA publicly. He was a spy. I called up my friend, Andrew D. Bishago, who was a US chrononaut in the DARPA CIA time travel program. And he said that he was in a program with Robert David Steele, and that Steele was did not, and Andrew D. Bishago was part of the CIA Mars Jump Room program, and has been on Mars, was a CIA Mars Explorer, along with several other Mars Explorer who we've interviewed, including a Mars NASA astronaut. And that Steele was, in that public interview, was dissing the idea of a Mars, a CIA NASA program. And so from that, Andy Bishago's concept was that Robert David Steele is on the ITNJ as a deep cover CIA blocker. He's a, and so he did that to us because we came to him as a fellow tribunal. We were the Natural and Common Law Tribunal for Public Health and Justice. And we proposed to the ITNJ, the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, to have a public trial of the perpetrators of the pandemic. And Robert David Steele vetoed that. And he vetoed it. And I said to him publicly, on what grounds? And he could not give us grounds. So I think that he was acting tasked by the CIA on deep cover to shoot down public interest ideas from the truth movement as a deep cover operative on the ITNJ. And I stand with that opinion, and this is going to be published. And I'm a friend and colleague of other members and commissioners on that tribunal, and I remain so. And I'm stating it publicly here, and it's not only my opinion, it's the opinion of other truthers, because he has shot not only down, he has shot down a number of truther initiatives that would have made a difference. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, well, I bring it up because he's a pretty visible, seemingly whistleblower, but from what you're saying, I mean, I mean, I know he's talked about child sacrifice publicly before. So he sounds like he's trying to get truth out there, but from what you're saying, that it does sound like he's
when
not.
a genuine proposal, like when he was confronted by Andy Bashago, who's a genuine whistleblower about making public the CIA program and the CIA bases on Mars, his mission as a deep cover blocker overrode and publicly he dissed and blocked Andy's role as a whistleblower of the CIA Mars jumping program, despite the fact that there are 4 or 5 other whistleblowers from the CIA Mars jumping program. Secondly, when we in the Natural and Common Law Tribunal for Public Health and Justice were on the air with the International Tribunal for Natural Law and Justice, for Public Health and Justice. And I propose that we have a joint trial of all the perpetrators of the pandemic. Instantly, he jumped in as a blocker of that. And that's because that's one of his deep covered tasks from the CIA.
There's another lady, I want to say her name is Cindy Lee Courier. She's with the natural, I think she's done a lot with natural law. I can't think of her name right now.
I get a lot of bad karma on Robert David still, but I also get he's a wanderer.
Well, it could be, he could be a wanderer, but he acted very badly in
yeah, he's got a lot of bad karma. He's got like 3x bad karma or something.
Yeah, he acted very badly in these 2 cases.
Yeah, Cindy Courier is the one I'm thinking about.
Oh yeah, I know that name. Anyway, let's move on from that.
Okay.
So Michelle, do you have questions that I can try to answer with the pendulum?
Well, I guess one of the questions that comes to mind is I've recently been looking into so-called water towers. I looked at Sulphur Springs Water Tower in Tampa. Huge structure. I visited there when I took my mom to Florida. And the picture I took of it just doesn't do it justice. It is massive. It looks like a lighthouse. And I found an old postcard that said it had an elevator in it. Okay, elevator, water tower. Yeah, okay, what's an elevator doing there? But there's a nice little story about the water tower being built over an artesian well, and that the city of Tampa forced it to stop being used for the local water supply, which when I did the piece, I speculated that that was to charge for water, and whereas before probably wasn't anything people paid for. And then I looked around at other water towers, and again, they're massive structures. There's one in St. Louis that is the tallest freestanding Corinthian column in the world in St. Louis. And again, you
freestanding water tower or the tallest?
It's a water tower, but it's a Corinthian column. Okay, so again, think an ancient Greek temple, and you've got the column with the really flowery design up at the top. And we're told it was built like 1871 or something like that. And in looking at some other researchers, the idea that these were airship docking stations has been coming up. And I have a question about that, because that would explain the elevator. It also could have been used as a water supply as well. I'm sure more than one use, but I'm just wondering.
I'm getting a quick, strong yes on the airship docking, but
Yeah.
I mean, why would airships need to dock? I wonder how they worked or whatever.
I don't know,
I
but
guess they had anti-gravity back then, and it was before the airplane had, like, that was changed history, having those Wright brothers discover the airplane. That's probably phony baloney. Somebody wrote that. And anyway, they also talk about the airships in 1890s on the UFO people talk about that. So apparently there is information of a lot of airships. I wonder why they have anti-gravity, so they have to stay way up in the air, and then they can hook up to the top of a water tower and people get on and off. I mean, why can't they go to the ground?
yeah, I mean, it's just interesting. It's been people who've been making comments, and I've heard other people talk about it, and I think we're talking very elaborate
Could they be
airships. I would think they were far more beautiful than what we think of when we see the Hindenburg or the Goodyear blimp. I mean, I think they were amazing.
They might be blimps,
vehicles.
and that's why they hooked up to a tower.
Yeah, so I was just curious because I looked into it, and then all of a sudden people are talking about it. I'm not saying I caused it. I'm just saying my attention was focused on it. And then
we talking blimps? I'm getting no. Are we talking ships with anti-gravity? And they need to stay high in the air for some reason? I get yes. And people would get off and on at the top of the water tower. So all these water towers had elevators? I'm getting yes. They might have covered that up on the rest of them. You found it by accident on a postcard. It wasn't regular information.
right, it was on a postcard.
So they probably covered that up on the rest of them then.
Yeah, I mean, I think this previous civilization was incredibly beautiful and incredibly advanced and harmonious and balanced. I mean,
I've been told that humanity rose up to high technology. This is the 7th time. And the other 6th time we had cataclysms, and the population was knocked down to 1 or 2% of the people and back to primitive, and we had to start over. But this is the first time that we've reached space travel and have a higher technology. And this time, since we're completing the 3rd cycle within the rules of the universe, we're allowed to move to 4th density. Right now we're in there's 7 realms in the universe, and the first realm has the first 3 densities, 1, 2, and 3, and each realm after that has a higher density. So the 9th realm has the 7th density or whatever. So when we go to a planet can have be in either 3rd or 4th density. And in 4th density, only the DNA lines that have souls that have empathy for others are allowed to go to the 4th density. So all these reptilians and human bodies, their souls don't have empathy for others, so they can't go to 4th density. So we'll be free from them if we make this move. And supposedly 75% of the planets that have a large population that has empathy for others, souls that have empathy for others, which is mammals, birds, or vegetable people. 75% of them are in the 4th density. and you can only move to the fourth density after the third cycle. So humanity's, Earth's getting ready, our solar system's gonna go to the fourth density. There's 4 groups on Venus and 2 groups on Mars. One of the groups on Venus doesn't have empathy for others. It's an insect group or something. But so there's like 6 groups that are waiting to move to fourth density in our solar system. And I think we're going to, if it happens this year, the end of this year, it'll be great. But I keep being told we're going to get these reptilians out of power way before the end of the year. So
Sure hope
something
so.
could come up soon. Maybe the military
That would make me happy.
knock them out of something, or
I've been
maybe-
waiting for years.
maybe God's going to appoint a savior of some type to lead the people against them or something.
They're
What-
certainly exposed. I mean, I can list people that I'm aware of that have connections with the pandemic. It's not hard. It's not hard to come up with names.
Yeah.
Gates, Fauci,
I mean,
China.
when you quarantine the healthy people, that's not a medical move. That's a political move.
Right.
And it's an evil one. As I said before, medical plus political equals evil. There's no question about it. Politics should not be involved in medicine at all. That's only the case when there's evil people running it. I guarantee you, we get these negative people out of power, we're no longer going to have shortages or bad medical, suppressed technology. I mean, life's going to be wonderful pretty fast on this planet. Once we get these evil creatures out of power. And us 3 here are really highly motivated to help humanity, as is so many other people. Alfred interviews a lot of them. Thank you, Alfred, for that. I appreciate you interviewing us today. Hopefully there'll be a lot of new people to see Michelle's work now that she's on your channel. Don't forget to put her website, YouTube channel, and email address in the show notes so that new people can check out her work. Why don't you tell a little bit about your website?
Wow. It's a blog. And I invite you to go look. Like I said, I may not have nailed everything, but I've gathered a substantial amount of information to show why I believe what I believe. And I have to make it compelling, because if I'm not compelling, then who's going to believe me? But I am compelling, and a substantial amount of data to support exactly what I'm saying.
You got story after story to click in the top part of the website, and you click something, and then you got to scroll all the way down past everything you can click, and then the story's there to read about, and sometimes there's a video to play. Is this right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started to put my videos on WordPress, and then I think they changed the format on me, and I started having difficulties doing that, so I stopped a year ago, I think, putting the videos with it.
Get the link for a video, they just click the link.
So yeah, it kind of depends on your preferred format, if you like to read or if you like to watch.
I just wanted to say though, if you go to our website and you click something, you're not going to see anything happen. You got to scroll down past the group of things you can click to see what you clicked. That's why I had trouble on that one. I kept clicking things while nothing's happening. Why is that, you know? It's an unusual setup website, but it's once you know how to work it, there's a treasure trove of information there. It's absolutely. I mean, you could be on that for a month straight without sleeping. There's so much to look at and read.
And I will say that it looks like it would be hard for me to write all of that, but it's the easiest thing I do. And that's another reason I feel like I've got help from the other side, because I'm just a vessel and I know where to look. I know what to look for, and I always find what I'm looking for.
How long have you been acquiring that information?
I think my whole life, but I started to put the puzzle together in 2016.
When did you start your website?
2018.
Not that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
and I mean, I don't have to do it, but I do have to do it. You know,
when
people say
your website, did you have a ton to add all at once in the beginning, huh?
it just kind of writes itself in a lot of ways. And I was saying it, I don't have to do it, but I do have to do it. And I could not know what I know without sharing it. And I consider it the most important part of my life is to keep doing it. And I've got plenty of material to last me for a very long time. So just trying to get it back out into the collective awareness so humanity has more information to look at and to see. And people resonate with it because they've had questions themselves about certain things. And I got contacted by a lot of people who wanted to share their research with me. And I started a Facebook group called Piercing the Veil of Illusion. And it's a private group, and like-minded people that wanted a place to share their findings. So it was too much for me to process and handle all by myself. I had somebody help me start that. So people just post what things that they find interesting, at this point. But
what's your next question?
I think I'm probably, what time is it? It's 5:53. How much more time do we have, Alfred?
No, there are no time limits here. I'll tell you how long this panel is so far. We're at an hour and 47 minutes, so we're approaching the 2-hour mark, which is about the average when panels mature. And
okay.
And then, so
about 10 minutes.
I would say that we're approaching the time where you and Gary really want to start summing up the main messages that you'd like to leave our audience with. What are the main insights that you'd like to? I know that you have really awoken my interest in, quote, the mud flood, and opened my eyes to the pandemic as the mental mud flood. I mean, I see this now in a wider spectrum as mud flood, mental mud flood. That's just how, and I see, hey, that's not too much of a stretch, because I entered into your way of thinking, and I think that it's plausible. So I really want to honor your research and thank you for all of it. So you are doing a very valuable service. So I just, if you and Gary want now to really start entering into what's some of the main messages that you'd like to leave our audience with.
I just want to recap. This is a very hostile takeover of the Earth's grid system and humanity. It's not for our best interest. It's done by evil, jealous beings, jealous of the creator and creation, jealous of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. There's really underlying everything. There's nothing happy about the story of humanity on Earth right now. And, compared to where we were, the high level we were at. So the mud flood was engineered deliberately. The mental mudflood was engineered deliberately. Everything we've been going through as a culture, even a world culture, in our memories, you know, I mean, probably the youngest one here, but I'm getting close to 60, has been towards this end game. And, you know, whenever vaccines were developed, you know, and then you start hearing about things being in vaccines that shouldn't be in vaccines. Then you start hearing about the whole transgender idea and starting to push that as an ideology, as an agenda. You know, where children are being asked or forced to decide what their gender is, and if they think they're the other one, being encouraged to start transitioning from a young age. I think that's an agenda to mess humanity up. I think we're seeing extreme brainwashing with the media. I think we're seeing extremely damaged people committing the violence in the streets that have been made to be that way. With
Black Lives Matter and Antifa are working for the reptilians.
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of a communist socialist, you know, let's destroy the world kind of thing so that we can usher in the new world order. And you can only function in this new world order if you pledge allegiance to Lucifer and get microchipped.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, then too bad. And I won't do that. And I don't think it's going to happen. But
right.
If it did, I wouldn't do it. I care about my soul too much. You know, so.
What I wanted to say about the genders is every soul has a preferred gender. And you get to pick your preferred gender 93% of the time. 7% of the time, you got to incarnate in the other gender. And quite often, when someone incarnates in the other gender, they don't feel right about it, especially as a child. And that's where these demonic people are working on that 7%. They're saying, oh, you don't like your gender? You can say whatever gender you want. We got sex change operations. We can do this, we can do that. Just say you're the other gender. And that way they take you out of the having children equation is what they want to do, plus screw up the people as much as possible.
I think it's an agenda at this point. I mean, I understand, you know, enough about soul incarnation that we've all been one or the other or both or whatever through many lifetimes. But I think it's being done deliberately and maliciously right now, among many things. And it's not for our benefit. And I'm a loving, kind, compassionate person. I love people. I love to help other people. And I wish I had a different message. I wish I did not have this message. But it's so clear to me that we've been lied to. And like I said earlier, we're still being lied to. All the gaslighting going on right now is off the charts. So it's important to stay clear. It's important to stay in a, you know, a loving place in the heart. You know, it's scary right now, but it's like, okay, I know we've got this. I know we're going to be okay. But we're
going to get through it.
We're going to get through it. And I think they're going to be held accountable for it. I really believe that. So I guess that would be my takeaway. We've been lied to. And it's time to just look around your neighborhood. Just start looking at buildings, looking at the dates that they said it was built, and then ask yourself, could they have possibly built that in the timeline that we've been given? And if it's late 1800s, early 1900s, and we barely have the automobile, and we're building massive ornate structures, the narrative doesn't match with what's.
They don't know how to build today, yeah.
Look at rivers as canals. Start looking to see if there's masonry banks. look into the whole idea of undergrounds in the place where you live, see if there's a history of streetcars, and I can guarantee you that there was, because I'm finding countless examples of places that had streetcars that don't anymore. So there's just a ton of stuff to assimilate, but to start asking questions, because we do not consent. We never consented. This has been done maliciously, and so the crimes against humanity are just unbelievable.
Well, here's a kind of a factoid that for the mud flood, mental mud flood panorama theory, hypothesis, over the past couple of days, I had the privilege of interviewing a multidimensional health professional from Sweden who will be publishing his interview of the next couple of days. And part of the interview was about vaccinations. And he brought out publicly that vaccinations were actually first developed in the late 1700s. Mm-hmm. So if your mud flood was in what? When was your mud flood? 17 what?
I'm speculating that it.
She says late 1700s.
Yeah, my speculation is that it took place in the 1740s.
Yeah, 1740 was your mud flood, and then they started seriously in vaccinations around the 1770s, okay, is when they brought the vaccinations. So that's the technology that they knew at the interdimensional level. See, because you've got the main motors and drivers of the mud flood seem to be at an interdimensional level, right?
Right, that's what I would
agree
with that.
So so it seems to be an interdimensionally triggered technology, because I mean, all you have to do is listen to this interview and see that vaccination is a very harmful technology from the get-go. So from the get-go in the 1770s, it was harmful, and it was harmful from the 1770s, but its maximal flowering, according to them, will be in 2020, right? With the pandemic vaccinations and their planetary mass vaccination, okay? So that's one of the, I'm just putting that as one of the factual evidentiary connections of your mud flood, mind mud flood, hypothesis connection has to do with the vaccination technology invention in the 1770s. Isn't that amazing?
It's a perfect scam. We got the shot.
Isn't that amazing? Look at the synchrony.
They put whatever in there they want.
Man born in May 24th, 1942, then synchronistically interviewed the man who gave that information 2 days before interviewing you. Now, that's the positive timeline. That's the way that I view things.
And that's how my life has been. It's very synchronistic. And
yeah.
I don't even try to figure it out anymore, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
And saying all of this, I follow certain things closely on Twitter.
Yeah.
Way more reliable than the evening news as far as what's really going on. And I look at that and I think, oh my gosh, but then I see the things that are happening in my life that are very positive, and I see things happening in the lives of loved ones that are very positive. And I'm connecting with people like you all synchronistically, that my feeling is it has to do with bringing in the new earth, bringing in the new energies,
Right.
And it's happening it's happening organically. It's not, that's the only way I can put it. I worked in a rock shop here in Sedona when I first moved here. And I met several people that just came into the store and said, something told me I needed to come in the store. And I still have people, and it was related to the grid work. I still have those people in my life. And we are definitely connected to New Earth kinds of activities. And so, there's a number of reasons I'm optimistic. But a big part of it is people are waking up.
Yes.
If they weren't, I wouldn't have 12,000 subscribers on an extremely obscure topic. It wouldn't be happening. And so I'm excited. I'm excited because I want to get the word out.
Right.
That's the main thing.
And I'm here to help anyone who is wondering where you're at spiritually. I do soul reports, and if you're low on money and you want to just quickly find out where you're at spiritually, just go to my website and you can get a free mini soul reading, and I'll tell you if you're a wanderer, a star seed, or you're in cycle, or you're qualified for ascension. And I'll tell you how you're doing on karma, all for free. Just the person that writes the email. You can't add your friend or your kids or your wife. Just the one person. If you donate for a soul report, you can get a mini reading for your family if you want. But my soul reports are really good, and unlike other people with spiritual information, I do give a 30-day money-back guarantee if you're unhappy with my work. And I've been offering that for the whole 6 years I've been doing it, and only one person has asked for their money back. So I stand with the guarantee. And a lot of people have spiritual problems, and they're really confused something's going on. And I say, well, get a soul report and we'll see where you're at and what's going on. And with all my soul reports, you get a phone consultation that comes with the report. And I'll talk to you like half an hour or so. And all kinds of people get all their spiritual problems solved. I end up helping all kinds of people. I couldn't believe that I could. Just after they find out, oh, I'm from another planet and I'm here for one life, and that's why I'm confused here and don't understand, and I'm different than him, and all of a sudden they feel better and things are working better. That comes up an awful lot. But just to know where you're at spiritually is something you should find out. And I offer that to you for free if you want.
Very good. Well, Michelle, Gary, thank you very much for enlightening us and inspiring us and educating us. And you return to our program as events develop in this mental mudflood. But at least we've exposed the mental mudflood a bit.
Right. Yeah. You
Yay, team!
You figured it out.
And now I know why I was born in 1942.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I came in right before.
Fact.
Sorry?
I came in right before the JFK assassination, so I have a feeling that's why.
And I went to high school in Montgomery County, Maryland. There you go.
I did too. Rockville, Maryland.
Yep, that's it.
Thomas Wooten High School.
There you
My
go.
mother's name is Maryland.
I went to school in Rockville, Maryland. I mean, coinkydink or what?
Yep.
Okay,
It's a
guys.
great place to be from.
Exactly.
All right, wrap it up, huh?
Okay.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Much appreciated.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.